Hello, my name is Jess Coonan and I work with New York Sea Grant. And today I'm going to talk about some programming I've been working on over the past year around justice-oriented mapping tools and what I've learned along the way. So New York Sea Grant is a cooperative program of Cornell University and the State University of New York under NOAA's National Sea Grant program. And I'm an estuary resilience specialist located in Kingston, New York in the Hudson Valley. And my geographic ranges from Manhattan all the way up to Troy along the Hudson River. And I work with local governments and residents to tackle issues like sea level rise, climate adaptation, and flood resilience. And my partner in this project is Monica Miles. She's our former coastal literacy specialist located in Buffalo, New York, so other side of the state. And Buffalo is a former industrial city right on Lake Erie. And Monica worked with K through 12 educators and students. And she had a passion for using environmental justice as a way to teach about the environment. And so the way this collaboration got started is she would start sending me these mapping tools. And I have a background in GIS, and we would talk about them. And we finally came up with this idea to put together an environmental justice mapping tools guide, which I'll talk about in a second. So first, why environmental justice? Well, it's inherently place-based and it connects people to the environment in kind of a different way than we've thought about at New York Sea Grant in the past. It gets people to focus on their immediate neighborhoods and their communities rather than being out in nature. It recognizes that Black, Indigenous, and people of color or BIPOC and low-income populations have higher exposure to environmental risks and less capacity to adapt. And the environmental justice movement, beginning with Indigenous struggle up through the civil rights era and continuing today, it has empowered communities to have a voice in the decision-making processes that impact them. And environmental justice is also a foundation for climate justice and more equitable planning. And I have planning underlined there because in the work that I do in resilience and climate adaptation, we work with planning processes very heavily. So another thing that Kingston and Buffalo has in common, along with most places in the Northeast, is that it's been heavily segregated by race and class, which has led to disproportionate impacts in the environment, which translates to the health and well-being of the people. So the map to the right is a homeowners loan corporation, commonly known as a redlining map from the 1950s. And it was used to segregate cities by denying loans and mortgages to African Americans in certain neighborhoods. And this is just one example of a policy that has created the segregation that we have today. So the result of that is if you look at a neighborhood on the bottom, it has dark roofs and paved roads that hold on to heat, making summer days hotter. It intensifies heat-related illnesses for people, and all that pavement can lead to worsened flooding. Whereas the image on the top, this is a tree-lined street. Trees cool the air and they filter pollution. The plants soak up stormwater and prevent flooding. And green space is just really good for your mental health. And so these are just some examples of our physical environment and how it's impacting how we're going to be affected by climate change. Some other ways include where pollutants are distributed throughout a community and where infrastructure is sited throughout a community. So where are the highways, where are the industrial areas, and things like that. And so equity, it recognizes this past and these disproportionate impacts that we're living with today when allocating resources. So back to the guide, we put together this guide that brings together 26 free publicly available mapping tools through this justice-oriented framework. And really it's just for people to be able to access this data and build context in an interdisciplinary way. And so we held a webinar in November of 2020. This was still during the first phase of the pandemic before vaccines were available. So a lot of people were still working from home. And we advertised this widely across the state. We had 450 register and 250 attend. And we had about 100 completed evaluations that were positive, but people said they wanted more time and to take a deeper dive with the tools. So in response to this, we held a webinar series this past fall. We hosted the creators of the tools to come speak about them, to give demonstrations, and to be there to ask questions so that people could ask questions. The first tool is EJ Screen, and this is from the EPA's Office of Environmental Justice. It's been around since 2016, and it shows environmental hazard data next to demographic data, and it's a really great way to learn about environmental justice and the history. The second tool was Neighborhoods at Risk. This is by Headwaters Economics. I believe they were contracted through NOAA. And it shows climate indicator data next to demographic data. And one really great thing about this tool is it's super user-friendly, and it creates these nice demographic reports that really spell out why certain populations are more at risk. And then the third tool is our regional sea level mapper. And we wanted to showcase this because it has a layer of the Social Vulnerability Index, which was originally created to help emergency managers in disaster response. So all of these webinars are recorded and they're posted to our New York Sea Grant YouTube page under a playlist called Environmental Justice, if you want to check them out. So this is just showing a little bit about who came to these webinars. We had representation from about 20 states, plus some international people. The attendees for each of the webinars was 82, 77, and 64. And this pie chart is just my attempt to give you a feel for who was there. I assigned an organization type category to the attendees based on their job title and organization. And so that other category is really just when there was less than 3 people from that organization type. It just would have been overwhelming for the slide. So those are all listed there, followed by the next largest group is state agencies, nonprofit and advocacy, Sea Grant, academia, and then some municipal and county government, which is great. And so this just shows the diversity of people that are interested in this information. And evaluations were generally positive for that as well. And people really appreciated the chance to ask questions. So I just wanted to give a feel for the types of things that people asked about. The number one thing was they really wanted examples of how other people and organizations are using the tools in their work. And so the creators of the tools didn't always have examples. Sometimes they would have like 1 or 2. And I think this really gets at people want to use this information, but they're still a little uncertain of how to implement it in their work. Another big question was, how do you define a community? And this gets at the fact that census tracts and census block groups they rarely align with neighborhoods and political boundaries. So that also drives home the fact that these tools are great for kind of a first pass, but you might need more data to really drill down based on whatever you're using it for. Another question after the second webinar was, okay, so what's the difference between EJ Screen and Neighborhoods at Risk? And to me, they're really obvious differences, but I think I need to do a better job of articulating that. And I think it connects back to that first question of getting those use cases so that people can understand which tool to use for their purposes. People were really interested in, the data sources, especially census data and what year it was from. And this is especially important now because demographics and the makeup of many neighborhoods are changing rapidly as people move around and through gentrification. And then finally, this last one is very New York specific, but I thought it was really cool. We have a Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, or the Climate Act, that's being implemented. And there's a heavy climate justice component and really trying to allocate resources to disadvantaged communities. And so it's great to see that people were making that connection and thinking critically about, what that mapping tool will look like and what's the differences between the ones that we were showing in the webinars. And so to get at those use cases, I've been collecting them in my own work and based on how people are using both of the guide and from the webinars. And so there's been some definite headway in education. There's a museum in Rochester that used the mapping tools guide to create a water exhibit. We created an activity in our New York State Climate Stewards curriculum, which is some adult learning, people that are interested in helping their own communities. And the activity helped them raise awareness about environmental justice issues in their own communities. The Association of Local Government Auditors DEI committee reached out to me because they got their hands on the guide, and I think it's awesome that organizations like that are asking questions about these tools. I have some local examples of people really wanting to incorporate the tools into their natural resource inventories, which is a very map-heavy process. And I'd love to see the tools in other planning processes like comprehensive plans and hazard mitigation plans. And then we're also using them internally in New York Sea Grant just to think about our programming. And they're also great for grant writing. I just wanted to flash this slide for some resources in case anyone wants to hear more about disproportionate impacts. And my next steps for this project are really just to continue holding these webinars and giving presentations for smaller groups. My next webinar will be hosting a researcher from CUNY Hunter who's going to talk about how people can do their own heat mapping using open source software. I'm also going to prioritize building relationships with community-based organizations that work directly with people that are more at risk, and just continue to shine a light on this information when it makes sense. And hoping that there's more use over the next few years and into the future. So thank you very much for your interest. And if you want to reach out, I'd love to hear from you.